Woo! Yay, cheers. You guys all know what you're here for. I want to introduce Joel Aaron and Keith Kellogg from Lucasfilm. They're going to show you some really cool stuff after this. If you guys have a wristband for the screening, you can stay. Everyone else, we will have to clear the room completely, though. So you guys are going to want to line up, and then they will be signing over in the corner by Artist Alley afterwards if you guys want to get a signed poster. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, I'm Joel.
I'm Keith.
And we're going to talk to you a little bit about how we got going to create Resistance, what it took to get it going, what we do for our day-to-day. I'll talk a little bit about the lighting, and Keith will talk about the effects. I do want to ask if it's possible not to take pictures or shoot video of the material that we're going to show, if that's okay.
There might be things that people aren't allowed to see.
Yeah. You guys are special. Okay. So when we were working on Rebels, we were trying to think of another show and what to do. And Amy Beth Christensen, who is one of our concept designers, she started sketching out ideas for a new look. And one thing that we all felt was that, especially the directive coming from Dave, was that we wanted to have something that was more of like an anime quality, something that we all love. Like all of us, love all the Miyazaki movies, Ghost in the Shell, Akira, me, Gundam, and Star Blazers. And so it's something we all love and we're really passionate about. We've never really had a vehicle for us to do that with, and allowed us to kind of push the look a little bit as well as like animation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for animation, we've always done obviously the real 3D characters and things with sort of like the kind of, typical, they're very real looking and things. So this allowed us to kind of change that up a little bit and try and do something that was a little bit different style wise, which was really an interesting challenge for all of us. I think, being fans of anime, I'm sure, do we have fans of anime here? Lots of people? All right, cool. So for us to get a chance to really, officially mix like Star Wars with an anime kind of style was really, really cool.
One of the things we definitely knew we wanted to do was to have something that at least looked different. And that's what, not so much just with the animation style, but also with the look. And when Amy started to, ABC is what I'll refer to as, when ABC started drawing, one of the first things was like these extended legs, things that looked a little bit more exaggerated. We were big fans of like Lupin, Cowboy Bebop. We love that look. I had just seen a movie that was phenomenal called Your Name by Makoto Shinkai. He also did 5 centimeters a second. You can watch him Crackle. It's really good. Or Crunchyroll. So we had been working with our teams overseas, and one of the teams is Polygon, and Polygon is they're a studio they're out of Japan. And they do a lot of this kind of stylized look. So in the very beginning, Amy Beth started working with Polygon Pictures to work on a look with us. And so through that, we're able to start kind of coming up with a look of the sets, the characters. And here I'm going to cycle through these as we're talking, but you'll see, for those of you who watch the show, everybody watched Resistance so far? Anybody? Okay, if you haven't, start watching. It's really good. I'm ripping through the episodes now, and it's actually really enjoyable. So we also worked with some ILM veterans like Bill George. Bill George, who is now almost 40 years at ILM, he actually built a model of this. This is our base. This is the Colossus. And he built this. He built it as a physical model. He also built a custom X-Wing. He built the Fireball, which is the main ship on this show. And so by teaming up with a bunch of people who have all this passion in Star Wars and this passion in anime and this look, we kind of all came together, and Amy just started coming up with looks and working with Polygon to make sure that we can kind of pull this off.
And one of the things about the Colossus, the idea Dave had originally was he was like, I want a show where we can just talk about like pilots and sort of the places they go and hang out. And so we created this big giant air hangar base kind of thing that's sort of out in the galaxy where different ships go to different, as people who've seen the show so far, there's a lot of different species and things all kind of conglomerate onto this giant Colossus. And so we really wanted to kind of have a show where you get to spend a lot of time there and learn all the different places that all the different characters hang out, whether it's, at Aunt Z's, which is obviously a very big part of the show. Constantly there's conversations around there. Then we get to go into the different rooms of the characters, but you really throughout the season will kind of start to see what the Colossus is about, and we'll slowly start to kind of reveal other parts of it as you keep going.
One thing I definitely want to reiterate, which is it took a while, I think, for me to kind of wrap my brain around, is this show is for kids, just like how Star Wars was for kids. Right now I'm doing something for work where I'm watching all the episodes, and to actually watch it and watch some of these early ones with my daughter and watch it through like a 9 or 10-year-old's eyes, it gives me a completely different perspective on the show. Where you kind of have to conjure up while working on this show your inner 10 to 14-year-old, and that's kind of how we all are at work. I mean, it is kind of this fun. We know it's for kids. We know we need to put stuff in there that's rewarding for adults to watch because, I, like many other parents, like Keith as well, we'll watch these shows, but sometimes these kids shows aren't rewarding for the parents. And the real honor of being able to work on Star Wars is that we can make something for kids and still put something in there for the people my age, because I was 11 years old when Star Wars came out, and I remember that. And so I pour that back into the show, and we all do. Like every nuance, we always try and make sure, every little nuance on the show, we try and make sure just comes from our little inner child. I
mean, if you look at that, if you go back one image, sorry, if you look at this, if you really study things and you look around the Colossus, you'll see a lot of little like Easter eggs of different things, like the helmets in the background and things, and different little insignias and stuff. So there's definitely things that are on there that we try and make sure, ABC and her team does an amazing job of sort of including those little Easter eggs here and there and stuff for you guys to find. And we wait for you guys to point them all out to us online, and it's really fun.
It's pretty awesome. The sets themselves, when Dave Filoni was first talking about the show, he was talking about having a world that was thriving within the Star Wars universe. We've always talked about that. That's what Rebels was. Rebels was a world within the Star Wars universe. Well, here we're kind of, departed from it quite a bit. We're on the outskirts of really the Star Wars world. We're at a refueling station on a planet that's covered by water with no land. And, people just pass through. There's no lightsaber or force being used in these opening episodes that we've seen. And it's a world that allows us to play almost like a sitcom. We have the sets, we have Aunt Z's, we have the hangars, we have, the pirates, as you'll see. It's like everybody has their own little place, and I think that's what makes this show so rewarding, is we keep going back to these places and you become familiar with it. And so that's one of the main heartbeats of Resistance. Some of the really crazy characters, what's funny is that Dave would always draw these crazy characters based off of like things that George would say, like, well, why don't you just take a fish and put a horse head on it? That kind of concept. And so Flix and Orca, who are the two guys that kind of work in the parts department of the ship, they're voiced by Jim Rash and Bobby Moynihan. And just listening to those two guys riff, and you realize, oh my God, they're on our show. It just they add to that character, and they add to the quirkiness of the design of it themselves. It's like I almost wish there was a show of just these guys.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing we also did with Flix and Orca that's kind of fun. It's a little bit for older people, but there was a show at one point called The Odd Couple. If anybody knows The Odd Couple, there's probably not a lot of people in here, but there's some. But Flix and Orca, Felix and Oscar, we did a very similar thing for animation. We really looked at The Odd Couple and really tried to sort of incorporate mannerisms and things like that for each character. Orca's much more rough and gruff and tumble and doesn't really care if things get messy. Well, meanwhile, Flix is very fastidious and really wants to make sure everything's perfectly on time and perfectly done. And so we kind of incorporate things that we know of from pop culture as well sometimes.
see that in all animation too. It's like watching these again. It's so cool because nice thing about having this cast is that everybody is that quirky, and you start to see the characters like fall through. Like you see Hype, the guy in green right there, voiced by Donald Faison, who is hilarious, and it just getting the sense of his character and the arrogance of his character. It's just, you see it in the way he walks, the way he moves, even like down to the lighting. When we light him, you'll see in a couple of episodes, I always try and make sure it looks like he's always tough, like always a shadow over his face, or just something to kind of emphasize the characters that are in him. A lot of these I'm showing you are what we call situationals, where the characters have been designed and we're just putting them in the environments just to see how everything looks, and also just to kind of push the feeling of the look. And so it's important for you guys in this room right now to take a look at these, because we're going to watch an episode for those of you that are going to watch it later or watch it on Sunday night, and you'll see how we use these as our guide. You know, a lot of it will remind you when you watch the show of these situationals I'm showing you.
And I remember when ABC was drawing some of these and the team and stuff, I was looking at some of like the facial expressions at the time, and I was like, our rigs can't do that. How are we going to make this work? But, we figured a way. But it's always inspirational to see what the artists come up with and what the idea are, and then to see how Joel and I can try and make sure that we actually can accomplish it once we get to the actual production of the show.
So we're big fans of like Voltron, Macross, me, Star Blazers, and so you can see like when Amy does this artwork, you can completely see the influence. We knew we wanted this, and this is what we went after. So we'd also do these character lineups. It's interesting that you see the character on the far right we didn't put in, and it's just part of the whole look of like, how do these characters look together? And that was kind of important for us too. One of the things we knew going into it was that Disney wanted a colorful show. And so immediately color was a factor. It's like, Hype wears all green. Miku wears the all yellow with the green head. Bo Keevil there in all yellow and black. There's a clue. Griff in all black. He's an ex-TIE fighter pilot. So you have this eclectic
Look, there's
group.
Griff over there. Yeah, see Griff? Oh, we brought him with us.
So once we're done with the early development, this is where we work with our studios like Polygon and our main studio, CGCG in Taipei and in China. And we work very closely with them so that we know that we can get the look that we need and make sure that the studio can actually do that kind of work. One of the important things for our show is that we really want it to look and feel expensive, but not be. So we're constantly like having to be like a MacGyver or a jack of all trades to kind of figure out how to execute things without a large budget. Because what we really want to do is we want the artists working on the show, if you're ever going to get into this field, it's important to not have to worry so much about the technology and work more of being a craftsman or an artist. And I know, Keith, you probably talk about the animation that way, but we do a lot with our lighting, a lot with our matte paintings. The way we want to do things is kind of a throwback to the easier way of doing things so we can tell these stories better.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, seeing these characters, again, I haven't seen these situationals for a while, so it's pretty impressive to see how close we actually ended up at, based on all these different characters. It's cool. Yeah.
Okay, so the look development, here you're seeing the very first time I rendered Kaz. We had done a few tests early on just to see if we were able to execute this look, and I wanted to move towards a more cinematic feel so we can get depth of field. I love those anime movies where the background's out of focus and you have all those gorgeous Japanesey bokeh blurs and these circles. But with the character, we wanted to do something unique because there's a lot of this cel-shaded look. What I mean by cel-shaded is when there's just 2, sometimes 3 tones on a character. It's what you'd usually see in a comic book. It's very difficult to execute in a computer, and it's very difficult to execute in a computer and not make it look like it was executed into a computer by a computer. So what we did is I looked at a lot of other styles in anime, and one thing I found was this rim light look, this look of just casting. If you look at the screen left side here of Kaz, you'll see that he's got this bright highlight. And the other side, there's a dim highlight that's blue. We're also doing contour lines to kind of pull it out, to make it look like it was drawn in. So we tried, our goal was to get the characters looking as flat as possible. Even though we were going to have the look be, it was going to animate on 1s, we were going to be smooth, some of the effects will be on 2s, but we still wanted the characters to look flat. So in order to do that, we'd render Kaz. And here he is just straight flat. This is what I would get straight out of the render by aiming a light at him. Then we create this pass called a rim pass. And this is a way basically just to, I was talking about making it not complicated for the artist to make sure they can be craftsmen. So we render this pass that gives us, if you look, there's a green and then there's a red, and from the top there's blue. So if I were to isolate each color, I then just have green would be on one side, red would be on the other, and I can tell the programs that we use to say, okay, where it's green, make that orange highlight. Where it's red, make that blue highlight. And so by adding that all together, it would give you that lit look.
This is what makes our show look really expensive, that Joel does so well.
But you should see the face rigs. It's just bananas. Okay, so the contour pass was something that we kind of wrestled with because we didn't know how we want it to look. What we usually get with the contours is a contour is a contour. It's going to trace the line around objects. But we really needed expressions and wrinkles, and so we modeled that in. So now we have our contours complementing our wrinkles. So when you're watching the characters and you see them act and you see the line kind of draw out their face, you can see it interact with some of the expressions like eyebrows or wrinkles around cheeks. And once that's all thrown together, that's what you get. And we apply that to every character, every background, every ship. The only thing that's really different is we try and go for that anime style of painting backgrounds as much as possible to make it look like it has been crafted. Someone has had their hands on it. The other challenge was Phasma. And we knew we had Phasma on the show. And as you guys will see, there's another character coming along the way that's named Pyre. He's like Phasma, but all gold. But we had to come up with a way to make something look chrome, but to also be toon shaded. So I spent about a week trying to get all this down and managed to find a way. What's really funny is how this all came is I accidentally had my reflections turned on when I rendered my toon pass. And then Amy Beth, ABC, comes over and goes, it would be cool if the reflection was this squiggly line. And so with her just there, I just drew a squiggly line and finessed it and rendered. And she's like, that's beautiful. So to this day, it's like as simple as that. Just a really quick squiggle line that was white. And I reflect that white squiggle line, and you get this reflection across Phasma. So once I had the characters look down, it was then trying to do the ships in the set. And this is where depth of field came into play, trickery with lights. When you do light toon shaded, you only get one light and one shadow, right? Because you can't have multiple lights light everything. So we had to get really creative. So I went in and pre-lit every set where we would be and work with the teams overseas to make sure that we could do something that the artists could do. It's the same with the ships. One of the things we love on the show that you always see in anime are what we call blings or tings. And if you look at the top of the canopy here, where it kind of glows, or the front of the ship where it kind of glows. This is something that we're adding on to the show, again, to try and just make it look expensive. It's a very nice thing that they've been doing in anime for years, is just to give you that little bling to tell you either to look there or something looks new and shiny. One of my favorites was just kind of putting this together. I'm a horrible animator, so what you're actually seeing is it's not flying. I'm just moving the stars. And
he cheats.
I did. This is old school. The ship's actually sitting still. I'm moving the camera and moving the stars. But we wanted to see how the ships would look and behave with that same type of contours, that same type of toon shading. So once all that's been done, and we've done our layout and the animations and Keith will talk about the animation, but the final thing we do is we do our lighting concepts. And this is where our lighting concept artist, Molly Denmark, Molly paints, and you see these two images on the side here. Molly will paint upwards near about 15 to 20 paintings, and she has 2 weeks to do this, of what I call the tent pole images of the episode, and that gives us the look of the episode. And you kind of see here the final shots are playing on the right, and the lighting concepts are on the left. And you should remember at the beginning of that clip, if you look at the beginning of the clip, you'll see how everything lines up to the lighting concept. So watch, you'll see that come up here, right there. So we try and use that lighting concept as our target, and that is how the show gets lit. I then work with the overseas team. We do dailies. We work for several weeks to get everything done. And then I go into color correct with my buddy Sean Wells, and we push the show even more. We boost that saturation, we vignette it, we contrast it, and make it look like what you're gonna see later. So next up is Keith to talk about character animation.
So with this style, as we're trying to figure it out and things, as you guys have said, you've watched anime before. One of the big things about anime was that it's done on what's called 2s or sometimes 3s, where it has sort of that like steppy kind of look to it. It almost looks like you're kind of missing some frames here and there. And we started experimenting once I sort of knew what look we were going to go with. We kind of experimented a little bit with that. But then, the real reason that was done early on was because people didn't want to draw 24 frames every second. So they came up with, hey, let's do this on 2s, let's do this on 3s, so it's a lot less drawings to have to do. But now we have the computer doing the drawings, so there's really not a great reason not to put it all in there if you can have it. So, we decided to try and go that way, which is something that's really not seen very much in sort of this style. So it was an interesting kind of dilemma to kind of figure out how we were going to do. And then the other thing that we talked about was doing no motion blur. And if you know, motion blur saves animators like a lot. So the fact that this show had none, we kind of had to figure out how are we still going to get some looks that we were looking for and not make it feel too stiff and things like that. So if you want to go ahead. So this was talking about sort of posing. So before every show, Joel will do like a lighting guide basically for all the artists. I'll do sort of an animation style guide kind of thing to kind of go over and give all the artists an idea of what we would want to see with this show and what we were doing, because on this we were really practicing poses. Poses on this show are a huge part of it. If you guys had watched Rebels and Clone Wars and things, the characters on there they're always breathing. They're much more alive, I guess, kind of thing. With this, we wanted to go what's called pose to pose, which is much more trying to hit these very strong poses. So you can see, like, if you look at the two on the, where are they? On the left. I was basically trying to show, what is not a good pose for the show. And this is the same exact pose. There's no real change in anything except for just little sort of adjustments. I mean, it's Kaz standing there with his arms crossed. But if you look at the one with all the red marks on it, it just doesn't look very nice. If you look on the other one, he's got a nice sort of curvature to him. He's not straight like he was in the other one. He's definitely got the shoulder height. You can kind of see if you look, the shoulders on one are perfectly symmetrical, and the other you kind of have a little bit of what's called contrapposto. And just the overall just style. The face is exactly the same, but one just looks a lot nicer to look at. So that's kind of what I went through, and I did the same sort of thing with the run. This was an idea with the animation. One of the things is trying to make sure we don't do too much in terms of like too many poses